Story 1. Context: I work with vulnerable adults, assisting them with daily life, including at medical appointments. The vulnerable adults employ me directly, in this case an elderly man with a variety of disabilities as well as dementia. Cast: elderly man Chris, me, the assistant, scooter lady Cora, a woman who I know to chat to as she attends a lot of the same clinics as Chris. There's also the nurse, the phlebotomist, and lastly, an angry man. Note: the names are fake. I'm taking Chris to an outpatient's clinic for blood tests. Due to COVID, most people are on their own, but he can't attend without support. I'm wearing a black sweater with a nerdy slogan on it and navy jeans. I'm a plump, middle-aged woman. All the nursing staff are wearing light-colored scrubs. Everyone is in masks except for Chris and scooter lady Cora because of their conditions. Chris and I are directed to our third waiting room of the day, and there are no chairs next to a space for his wheelchair. Due to his difficulties, I positioned him so that I stood across from him and he could see me. We manage some conversation, and then he wants to read something on his phone, so I set that up for him. Then Cora arrives and parks her scooter next to me and strikes up a conversation for a bit that eventually lapses into silence, as we all wait for names to be called into one of the two clinics leading off the waiting area. Nurse: Emma fake name. Emma fake name. Woman gets up and heads to her this way love. Cora: what name did she say? Me, Emma fake name. Oh, not me then. I hate waiting. I know how you feel. Nurse: Peter pseudonym. Peter pseudonym. No one moves. Chris's phone rings and he starts talking on it. I strain to listen in case it's something I need to help with. It's not, it's a family member. I relax. Nurse: Peter pseudonym. Cora: I hate it when people don't turn up for their appointments, don't you? Me: I usually worry they're stuck in the car park. Oh yes, parking here is terrible. Long ramble about the terrible parking. Nurse: Peter pseudonym. Peter pseudonym. Sighs loudly and goes back into the clinic. Cora kept rambling about car parking. An angry man gets up and storms towards me. Did you call my name? What? No, I'm talking with this lady. Well, shouldn't you be doing your job? Me automatically glances to Chris because he mentioned my job. I am doing my job. The angry man starts to shout, bloody well. Look at me when I'm bloody talking to you. Spoiled child. Did you call my name? Me, beginning to understand he thinks I'm a nurse. No, but the nurse called Peter's pseudonym last. So you did call my name, you bloody jerk. I'm not a nurse. Look, I think. At this point he takes his mask off and starts seriously advancing on me. My reaction is to glance at Chris, who is looking scared. I am now effectively pinned between Cora's scooter, the wall, and the man. The angry man interrupts me. Do your job. Which? Me. Okay. So the nurse went that way when she called for you. And you're just going to stand there and do nothing all about this. I really have to be here. Could you go and find it? The phlebotomist emerges from the clinic and says, What's happening? Why are you shouting? The angry man: This brat called my name, and now she won't move. I don't know where to go. The phlebotomist sees the mask in the man's hand. Are you able to wear a mask, sir? Me: Excuse me. Chris is now distressed, and so I push past the angry man to get to him. Did you see that? This brat assaulted me. Phlebotomist: I really need you to put on your mask, sir. I was calming Chris and explaining that the man just mistook me for a nurse. The angry man, hearing the conversation: Well, if you're not a nurse, you shouldn't have stood up then. Phlebotomist: Could you put your mask on, please? Nurse emerges from clinic. Why don't you have your mask on? Because the staff here, gestures at me, don't understand a simple question. Cora, in a sweet tone: The dumb patients don't understand who's staff here and who's not. The angry man gawks at her. The nurse: Come with me. Leads him away. Phlebotomist: I need to go sanitize. There'll be a short delay. Heads off. Cora: I hate long waits. Chris: Me too. I go back to standing by the wall and hand sanitizing for all I'm worth. Story 2. I've just discovered this sub, and I have the perfect story for it. It won't be a long one because it happened about 4 years ago, and I'm fuzzy on the exact details, but it's still a belter. I used to work in a convenience store, and the store manager was a real prick. Misogynistic, offensive, creepy, and a downright bully. Anyway, this guy, we'll call him Andy, fancied himself as a real leader. I mean, he wasn't. He set impossible tasks and yelled instructions whilst doing absolutely nothing in the office in the meantime. I had a colleague called Gabby who, to be honest, I didn't get on with. However, I knew that at the time she was having a really tough time at home with her 3-month-old son. One day in the winter, it had snowed. Fairly heavily. Gabby rang in that morning and told Andy she couldn't make it in as she was snowed in. Everybody knew that wouldn't have been true, and that it was likely she hadn't slept well with the baby crying and whatnot. But you know what? Who cares? She always worked hard, and she deserved a break. It was only a 4-hour shift, and the store was dead anyway. No customers were going to walk over snow and ice for the morning paper. Plus, we were actually overstaffed. However, Andy had a problem with women. He was always disrespectful and demeaning. Like the rest of us, he knew she wouldn't be snowed in. But he didn't let it lie. He wanted to catch her out. Andy abandoned the store, serious gross misconduct, and got in his car. He made the 15-minute drive all the way to Gab's house and took pictures of her car, her front driveway, and the rest of the street, to prove she wasn't snowed in. He then called her into the office at the end of the week for a disciplinary. When she came out, she was in tears. She was on a final warning. Andy wouldn't want a dismissal on his quarterly record, so he basically just threatened her instead. This didn't sit well with anybody. We hated him anyway. But he went too far, making a single mom cry over something so ridiculous. Well, here's the good part. What Andy didn't realize was that on the last work night out, he had drunkenly revealed to the team that he was a serial cheat. He would regularly cheat on his wife of 18 years. He also has 2 teenage sons. He was even justifying all this with some disturbing reasons. Andy used to tell his wife that in the evening he finished at 23 o'clock. This was a lie. He never worked later than 21 o'clock. After an evening shift, he'd go have an affair. Well, one evening, he finished at 21 o'clock, and he got in his car and started driving. What he didn't realize was that Gab, who wasn't on shift that day, had dropped her son at her mom's house and had waited outside the store in her car for Andy to leave. She tailed his car all the way to his hookup house and parked 3 houses down. She then proceeded to take pictures of him with this random woman, before pulling her inside and slamming the door. You can see where this is going. Andy didn't come into work for a week. When we saw him next, he looked broken. His wife had been anonymously sent the pictures of him with another woman. She'd kicked him out and had contacted a solicitor to start a divorce process. His sons had blocked his number and wanted nothing to do with him. Of course, he knew who sent the pictures, but he had no proof, no evidence. Gabby stayed at the store for another 3 months before moving into a recruitment position for a pharmaceutical company. As far as I know, she's still there today and doing well. As for Andy, I blocked him on all social media after I left the company, about a month after this whole thing. He's a disgusting, reprehensible human being who thought he was invincible. He thought he could walk all over people, bullying and belittling as he went. Well, he soon realized that nobody is invincible, and I thoroughly enjoyed watching his collapse. Sometime after I left, he was fired after he decided to turn a professional interview with a young woman into an inappropriate conversation. She then reported him, and he got the sack. Awesome. Story 3. This story goes back quite a few years. Cast. Entitled Mother. Entitled Bully Her Daughter, Me, and My Mom. I had been bullied since I was 4 years old. I am now 17, and the bullying only stopped 1 year ago when I was 16. At home, I also had to deal with my brother, who has brain injuries. I don't say damage because his brain isn't technically damaged, but it does cause difficulties. Things at home were often hard, and I developed moderate depression and anxiety. Because of that, I always believed the bullying was somehow my fault, and I just accepted it. I became the main target throughout preschool, primary school, and high school. Nobody wanted to be seen with me. The entitled bully was the biggest issue. She constantly caused problems and even used to be aggressive toward her younger brother, her mother the entitled one, and her dad. Her father was a very kind man who never did anything wrong. For context, the bully was always on top of the social pyramid. She was the most popular girl, and everything went her way. The entitled mother always sided with her, and the schools would respond with things like, "Our students would never do that." If I ever retaliated, I was automatically in the wrong. All the incidents with her involved verbal and physical aggression, which eventually led to slander, constant lies, and rumors being spread about me and my mom. I eventually got used to all of this, but my mental health was spiraling more than I realized. My mom started drinking occasionally to cope. She was never an alcoholic, never drank large amounts, and she was never a bad mother. The entitled mother eventually spread lies that I was being mistreated at home, that my mom was an alcoholic, and the entitled bully started harassing me again when I was about 16. That was the last straw. One day on the bus, I overheard the entitled bully and another boy, a foster child, who was very unpleasant, talking about me, my mom, my dad, my brother, and my grandparents. None of it was good. I finally turned around and told them to stop. This was on a public bus to high school. Entitled bully, this conversation doesn't concern you. Me, you're talking about me and my family. Either stop or share the conversation with the whole bus. Boy, well, we were talking about how your brother is slow, your mom is an alcoholic, your dad is abusive, and your grandparents are delusional. None of that was true. Me, well, you can't say much. Your parents use substances, and your siblings once hurt you badly. You don't have a leg to stand on when it comes to talking about a loving family, so back off. The boy lowered his head and went silent. Entitled bully, you can't say that. Me, well, you can't spread rumors and lies about my family. Entitled bully, yes I can, because it's true. At this point, I was shaking with anger and nearly ready to punch her, but I didn't. My memory is a little foggy, but I know the argument carried on until she said, "Entitled bully, at least my mom loves me and isn't an alcoholic." That was too far. Me, well, at least I'm loved more than food. Entitled bully, are you calling my mom overweight? Me, well, if the boot fits, but let's be honest, it probably wouldn't. She started ranting, and I just turned away and played on my phone. When we got off the bus, she followed me around school before lessons and even hunted me down during break and lunch. Thankfully, at home time, I was able to go on the school minibus after explaining the situation to my head of year, who already knew about my struggles. A day or two later, I was back on the bus. At first, nothing happened. On the trip home, everything seemed fine until we got off at the same stop. That's when the entitled bully grabbed a worm, yelled something at me, and shoved it down my shirt. I screamed and pushed her away. I have a strong fear of bugs and small creatures, and I also dislike being touched on the back of my neck by other people. Her, you coward. I walked home ignoring her, frantically trying to shake the worm out of my shirt. When I got home, I explained everything to my mom, who already knew about the bullying on the bus and from all the years before. One Sunday, the entitled bully walked past our house. My mom was fed up. She had already tried talking to the entitled mother and to teachers with no results. Admittedly, my mom had gone to a wine festival earlier that day. She wasn't drunk, but she did smell faintly of alcohol. The moment she saw the entitled bully walking past, she rushed outside and shouted at her about all the years of bullying and the recent incidents. Later that evening, we got a call from the bully and her entitled mother. They said some nonsense and even claimed they had called the police. My mom hung up and didn't bother with them. 2 days later, the police showed up at our door. I wasn't worried at all because we hadn't done anything wrong. We listened calmly while they explained the situation. I went through everything that had happened over the years, all the bullying in school, and the recent events. The officer said that, based on our body language compared to theirs, they could tell who was lying. A few days later, we got another phone call. The entitled bully was given a permanent mark on her record, something that will stay with her forever. The next day, a police officer came by to explain everything clearly. He even handed me a written apology card from the entitled bully. I still have it stored in my attic. A few months later, the boy who had joined in on the bus also ended up with a permanent mark on his record. For me, that felt like sweet justice. They got criminal records, and I didn't. Story 4. This happened a few months ago, and the insurance claims took a little while to resolve. Now that they have, I can finally share the story. Cast. I was stopped at a red light, waiting to make a left turn, when I felt a sudden, sharp jolt. My vehicle had been struck from behind. To be more specific, the vehicle directly behind me had been hit by another car, which pushed it into mine. I got out, checked on the safety of the driver behind me, and then the man who caused the accident came rushing up as well, pretending at first to be concerned. We began exchanging information with the other drivers. I got his insurance information immediately, for obvious reasons, along with his contact details. The man then walked over to look at the damage and tried to argue that, in his opinion, the damage didn't look too bad, just some minor fender damage to the car in front of his, and he claimed there was no damage to mine. He suggested that he'd rather not go through insurance and instead offered to pay for repairs out of pocket. I examined my vehicle myself and noticed some minor damage to the rear. Admittedly, it wasn't major, but it was damage directly caused by this incident, and it was certainly not no damage. I pointed out the problem I saw. He repeated his offer. I understood his concern. Insurance costs can rise over time, but I didn't care about his worry. I only wanted my car fixed properly. We exchanged the rest of the necessary information, as I already mentioned, and we all drove off to our destinations. I live very close to where the accident occurred, so I got home quickly. Once there, I took pictures of the damage and looked up the nearest Mako location, not just any body shop, but a recognizable name that insurance companies usually accept without issue. I called them to confirm they could look at my vehicle for an estimate first thing the next morning. It hadn't even been an hour since the accident when the man called me. He started the conversation by trying to flatter me with comments like, "You seem like a good guy," before moving on to insist there was no damage to my car and asking if we could just let it go. I immediately rejected that suggestion, explained that I had photos of the damage, and told him I was taking the car for an estimate in the morning. Over the next several days, after I received the estimate, the man tried to insist that he wanted to pay exactly the amount on the estimate and have me sign a document releasing him from all liability. I refused, explaining that I would not sign anything until the repairs were complete, in case the final cost turned out to be higher than the estimate. He tried to dismiss my concern as silly, while treating his own worry about still being responsible for additional costs later as perfectly valid. He also tried to lean on his age, suggesting that because he was older, he knew more about these matters than I did. What he didn't realize was that I am in my mid-30s, have been working in a professional career for years, live independently, and take care of myself. That "I know better than you because I'm older" approach simply doesn't work with me. He then attempted to bargain further, saying he would not pay a single cent more and that if I didn't like it, I could take it up with insurance. He also tried to argue that it wasn't his car that struck mine, but the one in front of him, so I should remember that fact. As a side note, I don't know why so many older people think that automatically determines liability. Even my own father, when I shared the story with him, assumed that meant the driver in front of the man was responsible. That is not true. The man who started the chain reaction was entirely responsible. Honestly, I don't know why he thought his argument would matter anyway. I didn't know either of them personally, I just wanted my car fixed, and his behavior up to that point had not given me any reason to consider him trustworthy. He had tried to mislead me, bully me, fast-talk me, tell me sob stories, talk down to me and pressure me into giving in. I didn't trust him one bit. When he eventually accused me of trying to take advantage of the situation and get extra money out of it, I had enough. I called him out on his behavior, told him not to message or call me again, and informed him that I would be dealing directly with his insurance company. And that's exactly what I did. I reported the accident to his insurance company. I also went to see a doctor for a checkup, and his insurance company covered that expense. Later, I got an estimate from their local body shop, which turned out to be higher than what Mako had quoted me. Since the damage was minor, cosmetic, and mostly noticeable only if someone was looking for it, and because I was planning to sell the car anyway, I decided to accept their offer and take the check for the amount of that estimate. Edit. Thanks for the support, kind strangers. For clarity, here are the specific details of how it all happened. I called my insurance company, gave them the full details of the accident, and provided all the information I had about him and his insurance policy. My insurance company contacted his insurance company, filed the claim, and they responded by acknowledging liability. They also gave me the name of the shop they used for estimates and cut me a check to cover the doctor's visit I had for precautionary reasons after the accident. In the state where I live, it is not required by law to report every accident. Incidents with only minor damage and no injuries do not require a police report or even an insurance report. My own insurance company does not require me to report every single incident, either only the ones where I'm actually filing a claim. My insurance rates did not increase, although I'm sure his did. I've heard for years from different people that the middle car in a chain reaction collision is often held responsible. I've come to believe that's simply a misunderstanding of the general rule of thumb that the rear car is at fault in most accidents. My father taught me when I was growing up that the rear car would always be written up as legally responsible, and I'm sure that was common knowledge at the time. And maybe, to be fair, many police officers will indeed write it up that way 9 times out of 10, just as a standard practice to save time. But at least where I live, that is not what the law actually says. Story 5. I was born and raised in Country a Southeast Asian country where the minimum wage is around $2.50 an hour. However, my father worked in a large corporation and was given an important title, which made our family look quite wealthy on the outside, although his spending habits were out of control and he had no savings at the end of the day. My father had gone through several marriages and divorces before finally settling down with a woman from Country B, a former Soviet Union nation in Central Asia. She had a daughter from her previous marriage, and both of them became part of our family. When my father passed away, the law in Country A revoked the wife and daughter's residency and required them to return to Country B. While mourning my father's passing, my uncle agreed to take them in temporarily until their flights were settled. But the woman gave my uncle a very difficult time. He had to come up with money from his own pocket because my father had lost his high-paying job and all of his retirement funds before his death. At the time of my father's passing, I had already migrated to Australia in search of a better life. However, I was struggling financially and could not afford to buy a ticket to fly back and attend his funeral. Several years passed, and my stepmother and stepsister settled in their homeland. But my stepmother, who disliked my uncle, was clever enough to use her daughter to squeeze some money from him, even though he was already retired and had limited retirement funds. When my uncle began cutting them off financially, they started contacting me, asking me not to forget them. I had not yet known about the issues between them and my uncle. Over the years, I became a naturalized Australian citizen and managed to secure a better-paying job. I eventually saved up enough money to take a trip to Country B, which was becoming a popular tourist destination at the time. The country had also recently allowed Australian passport holders a 3-month visa-free stay. I thought that by visiting them, they would show me some hospitality, perhaps by taking me around their country and helping me revisit memories of my late father. Instead, someone stole $400 out of my wallet, and I ended up exploring the country on my own. To make matters worse, my stepsister's fiancé constantly tried to get me to buy him drinks when we went out. When I returned to Australia, the COVID-19 pandemic struck. They saw this as an opportunity to get my sympathy and financial help. The stepdaughter would always text me bad news about how everyone was losing their jobs and could not even afford basic food. However, as soon as the lockdown was lifted in Country B, my stepsister posted photos of her wedding with her fiancé, a lavish event held at a restaurant. At that point, I thought they would understand that as a married couple, it was their responsibility to earn money for themselves rather than depending on others. I was wrong. As soon as she gave birth, she kept sending me photos of her baby out of nowhere. Instead of being endearing, it felt more like she was implying that her child was somehow my responsibility. The most frustrating part was that whenever I posted photos of simple holidays or cheap purchases like items from Kmart, she would immediately message me, asking how I was doing, and then following up with how bad the economy was in Country B, and how people were on the verge of losing their jobs. Eventually, I realized I should not give her any more leniency. I explained to her that responsibilities come with adulthood, and that I was no longer going to be involved in their lives. My connection to them should have ended the day my father passed away, and any entitlement to our family's wealth ended with him. The truth is, there was nothing left to inherit anyway. Now, my stepsister has stopped messaging me. She has likely told her mother that I have finally cut the cord between us, a cord that should have been severed when my father died. Just because I live and work in Australia does not mean I am extremely wealthy. People often forget that even when the Australian dollar has strong spending power in certain countries, many of us are simply average income earners. For example, if you earn $700 a week, nearly $650 of that goes to weekly expenses, especially if you are a migrant worker living alone with no family to support you if you lose your job. So yes, I recommend cutting ties with people who are not related to you by blood if the marriage has ended, either through divorce or death, especially if they act entitled. Kindness alone will not teach responsibility to people who refuse to take it on themselves. Story 6. Okay, so this happened a few days ago. For some context, I am a male 17 and I love playing games, and formed a gaming club within the college I go to. Unfortunately, in my words, I have selective social interaction, meaning I choose when I want to interact, and very uncomfortable around most people. Anyway, on to the story. I was on my way to the public park where I would spend time with my friends who were part of the gaming club. COVID restrictions were reduced to allow a small group of people to hang out in one spot. There were about 5 of us, all wearing masks. I was there early because I had just bought my first Switch console, which had taken me years to save up, and I wanted to surprise the guys with a mini Mario Kart tournament, the winner receiving a Nintendo £15 gift card. After setting up the Switch at the local park, using my mobile data, I usually abstain from using my data in case of emergency, but I had a ton of rolled over from previous months. After setting up, I thought I would test the Mario Kart game, since no one else would be there for another couple of hours, and since I had 2 charging packs, the Switch would last the day. The trouble started roughly 30 minutes later when I was prodded on my arm. I jumped a little and then realized it was a kid without a mask, which raised a red flag for me. When I turned to look at him, he asked if he could play on my Switch. I calmly told him that the Switch was only bought today, and I did not want it broken on the first day. I am very clumsy, so I try to preserve my consoles to the best of my ability. He then walked off, and which I thought was the end of it. After 5 minutes, the same child walked over with his mother. The mother confronted me. Excuse me. Her voice was very nasal-like. I remained unvocal as my social selective interaction kicked in. I said, "Excuse me." I willed every part of me to say, "Why, yes." I looked up and realized she wasn't wearing a mask either, and realized this was going to be a Karen ordeal. My heart raced, my voice cracking whenever I spoke from here on. "Karen, my little angel here tells me you won't share your games console." Me, without thinking, "And you, miss, aren't wearing your mask." Then I realized what I said, and then it was too late to say anything else to save it. So what? COVID restrictions have been lowered. I shouldn't have to wear a mask. Me and my son have asthma. Now explain to me why you won't share your console. I realized what she stated was absolutely false. The COVID restrictions clearly stated to wear a mask, and a couple of my siblings and my mother have asthma but wear masks. Because she interrupts me, I don't want to hear your excuses. Let my darling boy play or else. Once again goes unvocal. I couldn't find the strength to speak through sheer fear. Karen then suddenly snatches my Switch away from me and starts walking away, at which point I suddenly found my voice. I don't know if it was sheer will or sheer rage or a mixture of both. Me. What right do you have to take stuff that does not belong to you? It was tempting to shout, but I didn't want to escalate things. But things still escalated quickly. She suddenly steps forward, making me flinch, and smiles at me. It's not stealing if it belongs to me. If I wasn't angry before, I was definitely. The fact she thought she could take away the first thing I paid for out of my money and pass it off as her own effort. I grabbed the Switch whilst maintaining eye contact, something I have never done before, and started to walk away. Then I felt a sudden blow from the side of my head and fall over, making me drop my Switch. Lucky enough my Switch didn't break or scratch. But at that moment it was the least of my worries. I looked behind her and saw relief. A policeman was patrolling and was coming around to see what happened. I stayed down. So you finally know your place, you trash. I couldn't repeat what she actually said. I went temporarily deaf and I could barely make out what she was saying. But I think I can read lips for certain words. Policeman. Why is that young man on the floor, ma'am? It was self-defense. He was trying to steal my son's Switch. A few minutes passed as she explained her side of the story. Policeman. And you, young man? Me. Here is what really happened. I explain the story as you read here, stuttering, which makes the entitled mother smile, thinking she was going to get away with it. And since I bought the Switch that day, I even had the receipt for it, which I always keep on me for the day. Her face dropped, and even showed the officer that the Switch was connected to my phone. But she wasn't beaten yet, and she exclaimed, "He stole that phone from me." My screen had a 6-digit numerical code, which I am not going to divulge. I handed the phone to her, making sure that it would come up with my lock screen. Not only did it require a code, but it had me and my family as the lock screen, instantly indicating it was my phone. After a few moments of failed attempts of logging in, she gave up. Officer, you want to press charges? Me, no, but you could do her for not wearing a mask. She then walked away with a fine that made her look like she was going to cry. Epilogue. After that frightful encounter, the club members turned up, and we had our tournament. The encounter shook me up, so I could not play to my standard. But it was fine. I am happy that I got to keep my Switch.